When are your supplies good enough?
Illustrations by me.
So I know I go on about using the best you can afford, but sometimes you need to use some cheap art supplies. There's nothing wrong with that. If that's what you can get, that's what you can get. And there's no problem with that. So just in contrast, today I'm going to use the best that I have to talk to you about the worst you could have and the worst that I've dealt with in the past. And this is not an issue. It all comes down to what you're doing with the art. Now what you're going to see today, do you remember Mad Balls? I loved Mad Balls when I was a kid, and I had two of them. I had the football, and then I had the mummy. And I liked them. I know that they look a little disgusting, but I like Garbage Pail Kids too. They were fun. So this drawing was inspired by the Mad Balls, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to start right away with the eyes and then incorporate some other styles that I do in that with the eyes and with the Mad Balls drawing thing. We'll see it's going to be an abstract Mad Balls, if that's a thing. So we'll get right into it, and we'll make sure that I cover all the bases with the cheap stuff. And in the future, I may do something. I may grab some old stuff, some of the cheaper stuff I still have, and do something with them to show you it's okay. I should have done that in this drawing, but I suck at what I do, so I didn't do that in this drawing. Alright, let's get into it. My nostrils are two different sizes. Okay, well, it's not as drastic as it looks in the video. It's just because I was turned a different way. My nostrils are equally big, both of them. Just, they're a little different. Don't worry about that. I gotta worry about that. You don't have to worry about that. So, what I decided to do, I was doing this drawing and I was thinking, man, you know, all the times that I had to work with just subpar material, and how do you know if your art material is good enough? And that's really what I wanted to get to. Because a lot of people will say, well, am I missing something? Should I change it? Should I get something better? Here's what I figured out. Are you struggling with your supplies? If you're struggling, let's say you're trying to do something, a certain technique or something, you're researching how to do something, you're trying to do it, it's not working correctly, but you just can't, no matter what you do, you're watching tutorials, you can't come up with the outcome that you want. Then you have to start questioning, okay, maybe it's what I'm using. I'm doing the same technique that person's doing. I can't get the same results. Maybe it's the supply. Maybe there's something there that I need to use better. I need to go get something better, because we always have that, oh, maybe if I just had that one thing, my art would be better. But first, I want to urge you, your art supplies are probably good enough. It depends on what you're using them for. We're going to get into that too, but I want you to just take the time to try and make it work. Make sure that it works. But if you're constantly fighting it, you're not getting the results you want, it could be the supplies. It may not be that you suck. It may be that the supplies suck, and that's a wonderful realization to have, that you're like, oh, I don't suck. It's just that I'm not using the right tool for the job. So maybe that's the case. Let's look at what that could be. So where do you start? Well, here's where I always start. It depends on what kind of medium, but here's where I always start. Paper. I always start with the substrate that you're putting the medium on. Whatever it is, paper, canvas, whatever it is. Make sure you have that. If you're going to do anything, make sure that that's the best quality. And I know I say that, but that's not always true either. Because gouache can go on almost any type of paper with good results. I've put gouache on paper that didn't even have sizing on it and got a good result after enough layers. So if you have any kind of paper, whether it's pulp or cotton or anything, you can pretty much use gouache on anything. But if you're using watercolor, you really need watercolor paper. And I know the cellulose paper is not bad. I've used it for years and years. It's wonderful. But really, you can use cellulose paper for certain things and not for other things. Other things you need cotton paper to get the result of cotton paper. That's just what you need. Now, I'm not very experienced with canvases and boards and things like that, but here's what I've come to learn with them. If you don't have the correct gesso on the board or on the canvas, then you could have issues. Sometimes it's not the quality of the canvas necessarily, because you're sealing it off. You're putting something over it and you're trying to make it sealed. So that's not an issue. It could be the gesso that you're using. Maybe it's the wrong texture canvas or the wrong texture board. Maybe there's too much or not enough, depending on what you're doing. And that could be as well. But it's just the best place to start is what you're putting the stuff on. Now you can then move to like, okay, maybe the paint or the colored pencil or the marker. It really depends on what you're doing with it. What's the problem? Is it the opacity? Is it the coverage? Maybe sometimes your paint doesn't have enough pigment in it, so you have to go over and over and you can never get it to the saturation that you want because the pigment that's in it is subpar, and so that doesn't work for you. Or maybe, and so quickly I'll just mention that I like the Liquitex Basics acrylic paint. However, the professional paint covers much easier. I mean, it's like night and day. If you use the basics, you're going to be going over layers and layers and layers just to build up that color. It has the light fast pigments in it, but it's not as covering. There's not as much pigment in there. Now, if that's your style, that's great, and that'll work perfect for you. If that's the technique you're going for, it'll work out fine. But if instead you want to be able to cover quickly and cover the paper area, the canvas, whatever you're using quickly, then you're going to want to go with the professional series. There's much more pigment in there. It's much more expensive, but because there's much more pigment in there, so you use a lot less of it to cover a much bigger area. So that's just an example of when that can be a problem. Now, I know that there are some gouache that you can get and some watercolor that you can get that are just so subpar. The pigment in it is terrible, and you're wondering, why can't I do this? Because you're using the cheapest stuff you can get, and probably it's not covering properly. There's not enough pigment in there, or at least not the right pigment in there. And the other thing I want to talk about is workability. Maybe what you have, maybe you're trying to work things much more in much more extended period of time, and maybe using standard acrylic paint, and you should be using the open acrylic paint so that you can work it a little bit longer. Or maybe you need a retardant or something that slows the drying process. That's always a possibility. You can always look into that. Are you using the right materials for the job? With gouache, I know that's a big problem. I've seen some big box stores, they have gouache. The gouache is terrible. I've never seen anything like it. It's virtually unusable. And if you get professional gouache, then you're right in there and you can use it just fine. So that could be the kind of thing that's going on. Also, as I have mentioned so many times on this channel, when you are making a greeting card for your grandma, you want it to be light fast. If you're going to sell a piece of art, you want it to be light fast. And so if you're using paints that are not light fast, it may work well when you do it, but it's not going to last very long, and people are not going to really appreciate that. They're going to be, 6 months down the road, it's faded on their wall that's in a dark room, and they're wondering why, what happened here. So you have to make sure that you're using the right thing for the job. Is very important. Now, if you're using a sketchbook, who cares? You use whatever paint you're going to use, and that may work fine for you. There's nothing wrong with using lower quality paint or what they call student grade paint. I don't even like that word, because honestly, if you're a student, you should be using the best you can use, because that's what you'll end up using later. And if I don't know if I'm going to ever want to do it. Well, you'll never know, because if you don't use the good stuff, what you're doing is not what the good stuff will do. So you'll never know if you'll like what you're doing, because you'll be frustrated because you're using subpar material. So just use what you can, and just use it for the purpose. If you know you're going to just keep it in a sketchbook, there's nothing wrong with using student grade paint. There's nothing wrong with any kind of, you use the lowest light fast ratings you want. I've actually had paint fade in a sketchbook from looking at it too much. But it's okay. It's not a big deal. That's just for you. Color pencils can be a big difference there. If you use very cheap color pencils, they don't blend well, they don't cover well. You could be like, oh, I'm so frustrated with this color pencil, I hate it. But it's because you're using crap. If you were to use a good color pencil that blends well and that covers well, that's a completely different story. And then the last thing I would look at is the brushes that you're using. The brushes, that's tough because I can use very cheap brushes with my watercolor paint because of the way that I'm using it. But if I wanted to do a more like realistic piece and I had to get things just right and just so, I'd want to spend a little bit more money on a watercolor brush for watercolor paint, because if you can know, here's how you tell if something's really cheap. If you take a brush and you dip it in water and then you put some paint on it and you just put it on the page and drag it across just at a normal rate, steady rate, if it dumps all the color in the beginning and all the water in the beginning and then runs out quickly, it's a bad brush. It doesn't hold the water. But if you go ahead and it leaves a steady, even line, then you know, okay, this is a good brush. It holds a good amount of water and it releases it evenly. So there can be good and bad watercolor brushes, just like there can be with acrylics. If you're trying to do something that requires a stiff brush and you're using a very floppy, flimsy brush, then you're not going to get the result you want from your acrylic paint. You want to use a brush that's supposed to be used for that medium. It's very important that you do that. Now, I know, I'm listening to you in my head yell at me because I'm using water brushes here. I'm not using a very but I'm using the brush for me that works well for me. I'm still using the one that I get the results I want with. And yes, the water brush is cheaper and is not very expensive. It's just a little piece of plastic. They do break, they get clogged, they gunk up, they get whatever. So you just toss them out and for $2 you buy another one. It's not a big deal. But yes, you have to use the right thing for the right job. And I hope that makes you think a little bit about what you're using. If you're getting frustrated, don't get frustrated and give up. Don't give up on what you're trying to do. If you can't get a result, it might be what you're using. That's all I'm saying. Just try and look at that. I hate when people get frustrated and then they give up on something and they didn't need to give up. They were doing it the right way. They just couldn't get the result because of their supplies. Very important that you do that. You have to pay attention to what you're doing. So that's really my spiel on talking about this kind of stuff and using the best you can. I always say that. Use the best you can afford, but sometimes you can't and you're just, this is what you have and you don't even know if you're going to like it. You don't want to spend a ton of money. I get it. Just make sure it's the right thing for the right job. And if you get frustrated, before you quit, just look into what you're using and see if you could have used something better and gotten a better result. Look at the person that you're looking at and saying, hey, they're getting this result. How come I can't? Just look at the supplies they're using. I have all of mine down below in the affiliate links, in case you were wondering. No? Okay, we'll move on. Now, just side rant here, because when I was doing that acrylic paint pens and I did that drawing, I'm looking at the things and I was looking at the names, and the names of colors with companies is weird. I just want to give, this is an example. Now, this is supposed to be a skin tone set, right? So I'm Italian 100%, and they say that I have olive colored skin. That's what Italians have. They say, oh, it's olive colored. That's what it is. So what color olive is my skin? I'm not a black olive. That's not me. There's green olives. Am I sick? Do I look like I'm dying? Then there's Kalamata olives. Am I already dead? I just don't get it. What kind of olive am I? Can you please tell me that? I think that it means there's a little bit of greenish in my skin tone. Maybe. But that would, I don't have jaundice either. Maybe there's a yellowish. I don't know. But that's something that drives me nuts when you hear companies that are like, oh, this is skin tone set and these are the colors. So that's it. I just don't get it. I don't understand when people talk about that kind of stuff, what they're referring to. I have no idea. Okay, I'm done with the rant. Now I want to talk about something that bothers me a little bit, and it's when people are they want to believe that they can do more, and they want to get there as quickly as possible. So it bothers me when you have someone trying to sell you on like a course and, oh, we're going to make you better quickly and we're going to do this. This is the fastest thing you've ever seen. You're going to sell your art so fast you'll never even believe it. You won't be able to keep anything in stock, and they sell you a course or something. What they're doing, they're trying to sell you on the idea. They're painting a picture for you, and you love the picture so much of what you're hearing, and they give you all the feels that make you feel that way, and that's how they're selling you. And you, yes, I want to feel, oh, this does feel good. I'm picturing myself selling all this art and doing all this stuff, and it just makes me feel so good, and yes, I want to give you money to make me feel even better. Yeah, but they're not actually helping you do the thing. They're just selling you the feeling of doing the thing. It's like they're making you picture what it would be like to do the thing, and you're giving them money. That's really the entire exchange here. It's just a little. I'm not saying that there aren't good marketing things out there, and people show you, okay, if you want to learn about this industry, and you gotta, talk to this person, and this is who you have to go through, and this is the best way to do it, and this is how you keep your books, and like that kind of stuff is fine, but really, when people are just like, oh, next week you're going to be a millionaire from selling your art, it just drives me insane. I don't understand how people could do that with a straight face and tell people that, and then just take their money and laugh all the way to the bank. Or they don't have to go to the bank anymore. I realize that this isn't 1962, but it's just the same thing. They take your money, they put it in their Venmo or whatever they're putting it in, and they just, okay, so this is what's happening. And I don't know if I could be blocked for saying that word. I think there's a bunch of scams going on with that. I don't know what's happening. Anyway, I just don't like when people do that to other people, and they just they just build up this huge idea in your head. They're selling you a dream. It's a figment of your own imagination, and they're selling you on it, and you give them money. I hate when people take advantage of people like that. They do it with everything. It's not just art. They do it for health. They do it for wealth. This is how you make a lot of money. It just gets to me sometimes. I don't know. It's just, I don't like that. So if you ever hear someone do that, I'm probably going to do one next week where I tell you how to do something really fast. But I'm not selling you anything, and no one listens to me anyway. So that's just fine. I'm definitely going to do a video like that, though. Alright, that's about all the nonsense for me today. I hope you enjoyed this. And you see, you can do little fun things that, from something disgusting, do a little something abstract that looks wonderful, and you can use the best stuff in the world to do it instead of the stuff that you have. This was a terrible video. I don't understand why I even put it out. I'm sorry. I hope that one day you have the good stuff, because that's really where it's at. And I'm trying to... I'm relatable. You can relate to me. You just have to work at it. That's all. It's like a project. It's like something you have to work at, and then I'm supposed to be relating to you, but I'm terrible at my job. Alright, thumbs up the video if you liked it anyway, and you're gonna watch the other video where I tell you how to do something really fast. Alright, that's about it for me. I'm gonna go, and I'll see you in the next one.